In April 2020, Snapped told the story of Jamie Ballwig, who thought she had found lasting love with 45-year-old John Grachek.
She was really sweet, and she made my dad really happy. They had a lot of fun times together.
Until a peaceful Easter Sunday turned into a horrific nightmare.
911, what's the address of your emergency?
Oh my God! Oh my God!
John was shot twice in the chest and thigh.
What first appeared to be a random crime revealed itself to be anything but.
John and Jamie had separated, and it was very difficult for Jamie.
They think that she just turned into this crazy person that wanted revenge.
She had made statements that if John Grachek got custody of their kids, she would kill him.
Today, Jamie sits down for an exclusive interview to tell her side of the story.
I did not want John dead. I did not want that.
You've got it all wrong. This is not my mom.
I was like terrified because they had guns drawn on us. I'm sorry about what happened. I wish I could go back and change it, but I can't. I'm Jamie Grachek. I came here to say my part. You know, I have a lot of regrets. I regret what happened that night. I made a mistake, a really bad mistake, but we're not all perfect.
My siblings and I have gone through a lot in our lives just because of one simple mistake. This big thing that happened turned into something that really changed our lives for the worse.
It was Easter Sunday on March 31st, 2013, in the sleepy town of Riverside, Ohio.
Riverside is a suburb of Dayton.
It's a working class neighborhood. A lot of families live there. You don't see a lot of crime in that area.
But at 10:30 p.m., the local police department receives an alarming 911 call.
911, what's the address of your emergency? What's going on? What's going on? I think I got gunshots fired.
After the cryptic 911 call, Riverside police officers rush to the scene, where they find a woman crying over the body of a man lying motionless in the front yard.
When they arrived, he was awake. He was on the ground. There was a towel that was being applied to his side. We could see it was a gunshot wound.
He was shot twice. He was shot in the chest and shot in the thigh.
The woman identifies herself as 40-year-old Nicole Price. The man on the ground is her 45-year-old boyfriend, John Grachek.
I'm thinking, you know, he's been shot. He's going to make it. He's going to be okay. And I kept telling him to hold on.
Born in 1967, John Grachek grew up in the Lake Erie suburb of Fremont, Ohio, the youngest child in a large family.
He had a really big, booming laugh. He was a very funny and loud, outgoing individual, and he had a big heart.
In 1990, at 23 years old, John started his own plumbing company.
He was truly a god when it came to plumbing. I've never seen a plumber as fast as him.
1 year after launching his business, John met and married a woman named Sylvia Schaffler, and the couple started a family.
My mom and my dad had 3 children together. My sister Chelsea, me, and my brother Jonathan.
But John and Sylvia's marriage didn't last.
My mom and my dad were married for 13 years, and they split up when I was 7.
John wasn't single for long. In 2004, he met a young woman who would change his life forever.
I was 26, and when I first met John, I was attracted to him right away. He had the prettiest blue eyes, and we just started talking, and I could tell that he liked me, and, you know, I liked him too. And then it was like we were kind of inseparable from there on out.
Like John, Jamie had been raised in a big family.
I was born and raised in Ohio, and I lived with my mom and dad, and I have 3 siblings. I had a good childhood. I was loved a lot. We didn't have a whole lot of money, but we were happy.
Jamie, she had a mind of her own, and she always did what she thought she wanted to do, and no matter what I said.
My sister dropped out of school in 8th grade. She just stopped going to school, and she just never went back.
I dropped out of school because I got pregnant with my oldest son, and me and his father were together for a little while, and then we split up. We were just young, and, we just went our separate ways. It was hard to make those kind of decisions, being so young, but I had my mom, and she was right there with me, like holding my hand through all of it. And I had my dad. He was very supportive of me.
By the time Jamie met John in 2004, she had given birth to 5 children.
Between 20 to 26, it was like my life was crazy. I was pregnant a lot, just going through a lot of different things. My oldest daughter has a different father than my 2 oldest boys. And then I had 2 daughters that I gave up for adoption.
Life was really hard. We just tried to stick together and love each other and do whatever we could to survive,
With none of the children's biological fathers around, it made things even more special when John accepted them into his life as if they were his own.
I was so happy. I just thought, I finally have a dad, that's gonna be there, that's gonna love us.
When we first met, he seemed like a real nice guy, he took care of us.
John was a very good dad to him. The relationship that John had with my kids was great. It was really good. They all got along great.
Jamie had a couple of failed relationships at this point. She wasn't really used to a man sticking around, investing in her, and wanting to take care of her. So this was a really happy time in their lives. They were a big Brady Bunch type unit.
Despite their 14-year age difference, the couple wasted no time cementing their relationship.
We got married really quick. We got married within 2 to 3 months of knowing each other.
John and Jamie had 2 more children together, a son and a daughter. And for the next 5 years, everything seemed perfect.
They seemed great for each other, and she was a little younger than my dad, so I feel like she brought out that fun-loving side of my dad.
But by the fall of 2011, after 8 years together, cracks began appearing in the marriage.
They seemed to have argued more and seemed to be getting along less and less.
It was just really hard with 5 kids, and John didn't know how to deal with his emotions well. Sometimes he kind of took things out on me and the kids. He was violent at times, yes.
He would change moods really, really quickly on the fly for no reason. He always had this real bad anger.
John was the sole provider. He was a self-employed plumber. He made really good money, and Jamie didn't work.
He was the only person that was bringing the income into the house. So that put a lot of stress on him.
And things went south with Jamie. Jamie was using drugs and being very neglectful to her children. And my dad stepped in and decided that that wasn't going to be the life that they were going to live.
It's an allegation Jamie denies.
No, drugs weren't really a problem. I didn't have a drug problem.
But by the summer of 2012, the couple decided enough was enough.
John and I tried to work things out for about 1.5 years, but we just kind of separated.
My mom was very heartbroken. She would sit in her room and cry when he was gone.
I just felt so defeated. My whole world was turned upside down. It was really hard because John was all I knew.
Without John to support her financially, Jamie struggled to make ends meet and eventually lost custody of her children.
The house we were staying at that point didn't have power. The caseworker pulled up with 3 cop cars, and she was like, "I'm taking the kids." So that's about all I remember.
The day that my siblings and I got taken from my mom was really one of the hardest days of my life.
I was upset that they were in foster care. It was really rough for me, but I was trying to get back custody, and Children's Services wasn't really helping me.
With Jamie unable to provide for the children, John began applying for custody. Then, later that same summer, he met 39-year-old Nicole Price.
He went out drinking one night, and he winked at Nikki and went on from there.
We seen each other every single day after that. So then we moved in together in Riverside in 2012, the day before Thanksgiving.
Just 4 months later, tragedy strikes when a mysterious shooter attacks John and Nicole at home, leaving him clinging to life.
John was struck 2 times during the altercation. One bullet struck his leg, the other struck in his rib cage.
And he was removed by our medics to a level 1 trauma center.
From what the officers and the medics were telling us initially, it didn't look good.
Coming up, as doctors fight to save John, Riverside police begin to piece together what happened.
A lot of witnesses saw these 2 men run away, but there was a driver sitting there waiting on them.
When the police pulled us over, I was like terrified.
I didn't do it to hurt anybody. I was struggling.
I thought this was the end of my life. I'd never see my kids grow up.
March 31st, 2013. In Riverside, Ohio, 45-year-old John Grachek is fighting for his life after being shot at his home.
Emergency services personnel arrived to find John in the front yard. He's bleeding. They realize that he was struck twice, but he's still alive, and they rush him to a nearby hospital.
Meanwhile, Riverside detectives begin combing through the crime scene.
We were able to see inside the house that there was clearly a struggle because things were moved out of place and disheveled, and items were kind of strewn.
We found bullet holes in the wall through the closet door, drywall dust, blood spatter.
To try and determine exactly what happened, detectives speak with John's girlfriend, Nicole Price. Nicole tells the detectives that her and John's evening had started out like any other.
We spent Easter together. John was relaxing on the couch, and I was in the kitchen. John got up to use the restroom, and that's when I heard a knock at the door.
Nicole says the person at the door was a man she didn't recognize.
She described that a dark-haired man had entered the home with a gun.
And he was pointing the gun right at her.
I just turned around and screamed and ran towards the family room.
John starts coming down the hallway to intercede and to protect Nicole.
The man was telling John to get on the floor, and then I start hearing the gunshots.
After the shots were fired, she saw another man running away along with the dark-haired man towards the street.
I didn't know there was a second guy until after they were running from my house.
She described the taller of the 2 white males had the handgun. The white male with the handgun had a buzz haircut and some facial hair.
Nicole tells police that after the men fled, John tried to chase after them, but he collapsed in the front yard.
I ran over to John, and then he's like holding his side, and then I'm yelling, "Help, help." I don't know why they were there. I didn't know if they wanted money or to kill us. I mean, I didn't know.
They didn't ask for anything. They didn't make any demands.
Something's very wrong here. This was not a home invasion. This seemed to have a purpose to us.
Detectives speak with neighbors to see if anyone saw in which direction the suspects had fled. As it turns out, several had.
They said these 2 men got in the passenger side of the car. They said it was a dark-colored car. And that really clued detectives in, okay, there was a driver sitting there waiting on them. So there was a third person involved in this incident.
Detectives put out a bolo with a description of the suspect's car, and within minutes, officers have the vehicle in their sights.
Our officers that are on road patrol encounters a car leaving the area at a high rate of speed. So he follows the vehicle and conducts a traffic stop on it. They start ordering people out of the vehicle. Driver's a white female. She follows orders. She was very nervous, very upset.
When the police pulled us over, I was like terrified because they had guns drawn on us. They had us walk backwards and lay on the ground, and then they handcuffed me and put me in the back of the police car.
When they stopped the vehicle, there are two white males. One is taller than the other, one has facial hair, and the one with the facial hair has a buzz haircut.
That's when the decision is made to bring them back to the scene to conduct a live ID with Nicole.
To detectives' surprise, Nicole immediately recognizes the female who had been driving the vehicle.
She identifies the woman as John's ex-wife, Jamie.
I remember the police drove me back over to John's house and they shined like a flashlight on my face. And then I saw Nicole there and she looked at me and shook her head, but they didn't tell me what was going on.
Nicole also recognizes the two men as the assailants she saw running from the scene.
Police are able to identify the men as 29-year-old Gary Webb and 24-year-old Jacob Gibson. Nicole remembers Gary Webb as the person who held the gun and fired the shots into John.
I said, "Is that the man that shot John?" She said, "Yes, it is."
Investigators haul Jamie and the two male suspects back to the police station for questioning. At the same time, Nicole Price heads to the hospital, desperate to know John's condition.
I was really worried about John. The detective told me I could finally go to the hospital and see him.
But when Nicole arrives at the emergency room, she's met with devastating news.
The doctor came in and said he worked on him for a long time. He couldn't save him. It was terrible. It's the worst day of my life.
As the sun came up over Riverside, Jamie's kids were also reeling from the news of John's death.
All of us kids were with my grandpa Greg, so that is my biological dad's dad, and he got a call, and about 30 minutes later, he said, "Your stepdad, John, he has passed away, and your mom was involved." And I'm sitting there like, what in the actual heck is happening right now? Like, you've got it all wrong. This is not my mom. My mom would not do this.
It was April 1st, so I thought it was a joke. John seemed like this invincible guy, you know, because how big he was. It seemed like no one could take him down.
Meanwhile, at the Riverside Police Department, investigators separate their three suspects: Jamie Grachek, Gary Webb, and Jacob Gibson.
John has passed. This is a murder investigation. It's now a homicide.
The first person we spoke with was Gary Webb. He's been arrested before. He understood his rights.
He had some crimes of violence, aggravated burglary.
Nicole had told investigators that Gary Webb was the shooter, but during the interrogation, he tried to play dumb.
The crime we're investigating is murder.
Holy that's terrible. That is terrible, sir. That is terrible. I really, really wish I was not there.
Gary also reveals what he claims is the real reason the trio had visited the Grachek's home that evening.
Gary told detectives that they went to John's house to buy drugs, and a fight ensued.
What kind of dope are you supposed to be getting? Heroin? And the next thing I know, they're in there fighting over a gun. I don't know if Jake had the gun or if he had the gun, but the gunshots start going off.
Detectives aren't buying Gary's story.
They had no history of John Grachek as being involved with drugs. There were no incident reports of drug activity at his house. It didn't make sense to them.
But in talking with their other suspects, the truth behind this heinous crime would soon be revealed.
Jamie says, well, I never wanted anyone to get hurt. But what did she think was going to happen? This is a really dark plan.
Coming up, investigators question the woman at the center of it all.
Someone was murdered? That's correct.
And her reaction to her ex-husband's death raises red flags for police.
No, oh my God. I love John.
I remember even turning to Sergeant Trago. I'm like, she's not crying.
You know, they did say that I cried with no tears, but everyone deals with grief differently. Yes, I did love John. I still love John.
After John Grachek was gunned down in his Riverside home, police have arrested his ex-wife Jamie Grachek and her companions, Gary Webb and Jacob Gibson.
Investigators interviewed Gary Webb. He told them that it was Jacob who was the shooter, even though Nicole had already told investigators she knew for a fact it was Gary Webb who had shot John.
When investigators question Jacob Gibson, he gives a very different story.
He told us that you two were fighting over a gun, that you shot him.
Oh, that's a lie. Never shot nobody.
As we're talking to Mr. Gibson, he's basically claiming that Gary Webb's the one who brought the firearm over. He's the one who went through the door first.
Gary had a gun. I knocked on the door. The lady answered the door. Okay, then we got in a scuffle. Gary took the gun and shot the dude.
Police believe that Jacob Gibson is being fairly truthful about what happened that night.
His version of events is matching up with what we've learned at the scene from Nicole Price.
But while it's clear to investigators who pulled the trigger, the motive behind the shooting remains a mystery. Just before daybreak, detectives turn to Jamie Grachek, the only suspect with a clear connection to the victim.
According to Jamie, she had no idea that John was dead when investigators first brought her in for questioning.
When I was in the interrogation room, I was just confused, kind of a little scared. I didn't know what was going on. I thought we were in trouble just for, going over there and them going inside the house. When they told me that they were investigating a homicide, then I was just like, really shocked about it. And I was like, who died?
Someone was murdered?
That's correct.
Someone was murdered?
Yes.
Detectives tell Jamie that her ex-husband has been killed.
Please tell me that's not true.
Well, unfortunately, I can't tell you that.
No, oh my God. I love John.
I didn't want to believe it. I told them that I didn't believe them and that I wanted to see him.
The one thing that I noticed that was really interesting in the interview, she was wailing to the point that it seemed forced, and I noticed that there were no tears. And I remember even turning to Sergeant Trago, and I'm like, she's not crying.
When people have genuine reaction to a traumatic event like that, it's genuine. There's tears.
The police were a little limited in their assessment of Jamie's grief. There was an assumption that grief looks the same way in every person, but much like trauma, grief can show up in many different forms. There must have been so many things going through Jamie's head at that point. It's likely that she really truly was just in shock. And the body does strange things when you're in shock. So Jamie very well could have been having a natural emotional reaction.
You know, they did say that I cried with no tears, but everyone deals with grief differently. And I've had plenty of time to grieve, you know, since then. And there's been a lot of tears shed. And I do miss John a lot. And I do wish that I could go back and change it. I did love John. I still love John.
Detectives tell Jamie they've already gotten statements from both Gary Webb and Jacob Gibson.
I don't know if there's a connection between Webb and Jamie Grachek, but Gibson was the common denominator. They each knew him. Gibson also was a liaison or romantic interest of Jamie Grachek.
There's a string of text messaging that we were able to discover from downloading their phones that connect Jamie Grachek and Jacob Gibson romantically.
However, Jamie denies any sort of romantic relationship with Jacob.
He was not my boyfriend. He was just my friend. Me and Jacob lived in the same apartment complex, and he did maintenance there. I was living with a friend of mine.
Jamie, do you think you can help us piece together tonight what happened?
I'll tell you exactly what happened. I wanted the truth to be known. I wasn't trying to hide anything. I told the police exactly, you know, how it happened.
According to Jamie, it all started when she got a call from Jacob Gibson around 9 p.m.
It was Easter Sunday, and Jacob was calling my phone. He was talking about, we got to get some money somehow. It was kind of just like a spur of the moment, you know, thing.
Jamie says both she and Jacob were strapped for cash at the time and on the brink of becoming homeless.
Jamie was in and out of shelters, and I don't even know what she was doing for money.
She needed to support drug habit and just to earn money to stay afloat. She wasn't working anywhere.
The original plan was to rob a drug dealer that Jacob knew.
Jamie admits she agreed to the plan, but Jacob decided they would need some extra muscle.
He wanted me to drive him to go pick up this guy named Webb that was a friend of his. I went and picked him up, and then we'd swing by this drug dealer's house. Jacob, he had a gun in his hand. They told me to wait there in the parking lot. Then they came running back to the car. He said that the drug dealer jumped out the window.
They tried to execute this plan, but it didn't work. And so, that's when the talk transitioned to, okay, who else can we target?
I took like a couple Xanaxes, so I was kind of like out of it. He was like, so who can we rob because we need some money?
Jake's like, you got any ideas? And I was like, well, my ex-husband.
I thought maybe John might have had some money on him. Jacob acted like it was a good idea to do that, and I was kind of hesitant, but I went along with it. And I wish I wouldn't have.
The trio arrived at the home around 10 p.m.
I pulled up and I pointed to which house it was. They said, just be ready to drive. I didn't think anyone was going to get hurt. I didn't even think about that. I knew he had a gun, but I didn't know if it had bullets in it.
Has Jacob ever met him? John?
No.
No? Do you know if Gary ever has?
No, neither of them know.
So would they have known the house? Be able to pick it out?
No, I showed them where it was.
They got out of the car and ran up to the door, and there was something inside of me that was like screaming, like, tell them to come back, tell them to come back. But I didn't. I wish I would have.
I think that her guilt is compounded by the fact that she had an opportunity to stop this, but she wasn't able to do that.
I heard the gunshots. And then they came running back to the car, and I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what had happened. They were just screaming at me, like, go, go, go. And I was like, what happened? They wouldn't tell me anything.
Panicked, Jamie hit the gas and the three of them sped off into the night.
I didn't have my lights on, my car or anything. I was just driving all crazy because they were screaming at me. Jacob threw the gun out the window when we were driving away.
I didn't do it to hurt anybody. I was struggling.
There was no plan to kill anybody or hurt anybody. I would have never went along with something like that.
Despite her account of the night, police would soon discover holes in Jamie's story, suggesting John's murder was no accident.
I think it came all at once for Jamie. It was too much losing John.
Jamie was spiraling out of control.
Coming up, a chaotic love triangle is revealed, one that police believe culminated in murder.
She was jealous he was moving on with his life and that it was without her.
Honestly, I was angry at her. The fact that she did something so stupid.
I understand why you hate me, because if I was you, I would hate me too.
April 1st, 2013, Riverside, Ohio. Detectives are sitting down with 33-year-old Jamie Grachek, who claims her ex-husband, John Grachek, was killed in a robbery plot gone wrong.
When Jamie gets arrested, she essentially sees her whole life flash before her, and it ends at this moment. All of Jamie's aspirations of having a life with her children, having a loving home, felt like they were completely and utterly over.
It seemed like it was like a split second that everything happened. I'm just thinking about my kids, and I was basically in shock.
If this would have worked successfully, what were you guys going to do with the money?
We were gonna split it.
How were you guys going to split it?
I don't know. I guess they were gonna split it 50-50, and then Jake was gonna give me his half of whatever he could get.
Okay.
When Jamie is finished giving her statement, she gets a rude awakening from detectives.
Am I going to jail?
Oh yeah, you're going to jail tonight. And we can't avoid that.
Honestly, I was angry at her. The fact that she did something so stupid, but I didn't feel fair that, she was taken away for a stupid mistake,
But as investigators continue to build their case against Jamie, they begin to uncover evidence that suggests John Grachek's death was no mistake.
In secondary interviews with Nicole Price, we're finding out too that there were some other underlying incidents that happened.
Even though John and Jamie had technically separated in 2012, they hadn't completely cut ties.
John and her still dated off and on through the whole time of the separation up until the point he met Nikki.
With Nicole in his life, John had decided it was finally time to cut Jamie off completely.
My mom was pretty upset about the whole ordeal of him leaving.
It took my mom and John a long time to separate. And finally, it got to the point where he had left for the last time. She cried a lot. She would be in her room a lot, just really sad.
She was jealous he was moving on with his life and that it was without her. She lost her support system. She lost everything when John left her.
Jamie was spiraling out of control.
Nicole says it wasn't long after she and John started dating that Jamie started to harass them.
He got his phone number changed, and then she started messaging him on Facebook. Blocked her from that one, and then she made up fake ones. Tried to contact him through there.
Jamie disputes Nicole's claims and says John was the one harassing her.
After we broke up, he would like stalk me and just like he would be sitting in my driveway at like 6 o'clock in the morning, just sitting there, and like he didn't want to believe that it was over, even when he was with Nicole.
But according to Nicole, Jamie's erratic behavior escalated one evening in January of 2013.
Jamie had taken a vehicle and drove it through the front yard of their home, cutting up the grass in front of their home as a threat.
It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and he heard a real loud car, because this is a cul-de-sac. John seen her when he opened the door. We did call the police, and they came.
Yes, I did do that. I was just out driving around with this boyfriend I had, and we just happened to be in the vicinity of where John lived, and I wasn't driving, my boyfriend was, and we just kind of like drove through the front yard. It was really childish and dumb.
That's when Nicole reveals another reason Jamie may have wanted John dead.
It was decided that he was getting his children a week before Easter.
The courts ruled that John would get custody.
Coming up, investigators uncover a tumultuous custody battle that tested Jamie's limits and may have ended in murder.
The thought of losing children, I think, just pushed her over the edge.
They were the most constant source of love and affection for her.
She had made statements at a prior hearing that if John Grachek got custody of their kids, she would kill him.
Within 24 hours of John Grachek's murder, investigators are learning that his ex-wife, Jamie Grachek, may have had reason to want him dead.
She's been the only one harassing him, and constantly, and I know where you live,
By the time of the threats, Jamie's unstable lifestyle had already caused her to lose custody of her children, including the children she shared with John.
At this point in time, I didn't have anywhere to live, and I did not have the financial means to even, support the children.
It was very difficult for Jamie when her children were being taken away from her. She started having children at a very early age, so they were the most constant source of love and affection for her.
But after their children were placed in temporary foster care, it was beginning to look like John would be awarded full custody.
John was going to visit his kids weekly, and then eventually I started going to get to know the children.
He was doing everything he needed to do to work his case plan and get reunified with the kids, and Jamie just wasn't doing anything.
The final custody hearing was scheduled for April 8th, just 8 days after John's murder.
The children were going to move in April 9th. It had been decided he was getting them a week before it happened.
She had also made statements at a prior hearing at Montgomery County Family Courts with Children's Services present that if John Grachek got custody of their kids, she would kill him.
I think it came all at once for Jamie. It was too much losing John, and, the thought of losing children, I think, just pushed her over the edge.
Investigators surmise that Jamie had her ex killed to prevent him from obtaining custody of the kids.
Now it was all piecing together what the real motive for this crime was. And it was to get rid of John Grachek.
I think she not only wanted to take his money, I think she was looking for a little bit of revenge.
It's a claim Jamie vehemently denies.
I did not want John dead. I knew that he was going to get custody. I mean, what did I think, that my kids were just going to stay in foster care or get adopted out? I did not want that. I wanted them to be in a home with people they knew.
They think that she just turned into this crazy person that wanted revenge. And I was like, I don't think that's it at all. I know that's not it because that is not who my mom is.
On April 1st, 2013, police charge Jamie Grachek with complicity to commit murder, aggravated burglary, aggravated robbery, and felonious assault.
They charged me with murder. I thought that this was the end of my life. I'd never see my kids grow up.
Although Gary Webb and Jacob Gibson also deny investigators' claims of a premeditated murder plot, they face the same charges as Jamie.
Gary and Jacob said this was a robbery gone horribly wrong.
They said that there was no plan for John to be murdered that night.
With her trial date looming, prosecutors decide to approach Jamie with a deal.
I had been in the county for almost a year, and they came at me with the 21 flat time, and I said that I was okay with that.
Jamie ended up pleading guilty to involuntary manslaughter, complicity to commit aggravated robbery, and aggravated burglary.
I knew if I took the deal that I wouldn't get a life sentence and that I would have an out date and that I would still have a chance at a life with my kids.
Gary Webb and Jacob Gibson also plead guilty to murder.
For being the one who pulled the trigger, Gary Webb received the harshest sentence, 18 years to life. Jacob received a sentence of 15 years to life for his part in the crime.
If you could say anything, to John's children, what would you say?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry that your dad's gone. I'm sorry about what happened. I wish I could go back and change it, but I can't. And I understand why you hate me, because if I was you, I would hate me too.
Today, Jamie is trying to make the most of her time behind bars and prepare for her eventual release in 2035.
I will be 54, so I'll still be so young and I'll have lots of life left to live. I got my GED in January of 2020 and I was so excited. I called my kids and told them, and I'm in here, just trying to better myself so I can be a better person when I walk out of here. I feel like, I deserve the time I got.
Title: The Midnight File, a fictional cold case thriller. This is a work of fiction. Any resemblance to actual people, places, or events is purely coincidental. The town had forgotten the sound of sirens after midnight. Front porches still creaked in the wind. The old grain elevator still cast a long shadow across the railroad tracks. Every Friday night, the same handful of pickup trucks lined the diner parking lot, and every Sunday morning, church bells echoed across streets where nearly every face recognized the next. It was the kind of place people described with a smile and a shrug. Quiet, safe, predictable. Then one autumn night, everything changed. The emergency dispatcher would later remember only one detail with perfect clarity. The caller never screamed. There was only breathing. Slow, uneven, then a whisper. "I found something." The line went silent before the address was fully confirmed. By the time deputies reached the abandoned farmhouse on the outskirts of town, the porch light had already burned out. Their flashlights swept across peeling paint, broken windows, and weeds that swallowed the graveled driveway years before. Nothing moved except loose sheets of rusted tin tapping softly against the wind. Inside, dust floated to the beams of light, like drifting ash. Someone had been there. Recently, fresh muddy footprints crossed the warped wooden floor, before disappearing into a hallway where every door stood open except one. That door was locked from the inside. The officers forced it open, expecting a frightened trespasser. Instead, they found an empty room. Almost empty. In the center lay a faded cardboard storage box. No fingerprints. No footprints. No note. Only a weather cassette tape wrapped inside yellowed newspaper and a small evidence envelope marked with a single handwritten sentence. Do not file this away again. Nobody in the room understood what it meant. Not yet. The cassette contained nearly 40 minutes of silence. At least, that was what technicians believed during the first playback. Hours later, one analyst decided to increase the volume. Hidden beneath layers of static was something almost impossible to hear. Footsteps. One set. Slow. Measured. Then a man's voice. Barely audible. If anyone finds this, she's still out there. The recording ended with 3 sharp metallic sounds. Clang, clang, clang. Nothing more. No names. No explanation. No date for investigators. It made no sense. For the oldest detective in the department, it was enough to stop him cold. He had heard those 3 sound before. Not yesterday. Not last year. More than 30 years earlier. Back when he was a rookie assigned to the biggest investigation the county had ever seen. A disappearance that had shattered the community before quietly dissolving into another forgotten cold case. Officially, nobody had ever been charged. Unofficially, nearly everyone believed they knew who had done it. But belief never became proof. Witnesses changed their stories. Physical evidence vanished. Memories blurred. One detective retired. Another died. Boxes filled with reports disappeared into storage shelves where dust slowly covered names nobody wanted to pronounce anymore. Until now, the retired detective drove back to headquarters before sunrise without waiting for anyone to invite him. He asked one question. Where'd you find that tape? No one had an answer. The farmhouse had been abandoned for nearly 2 decades. Its previous owner had died years before. The property had changed hands twice. Utility records showed no electricity, no running water, no signs of recent occupation. Yet someone had entered the building. Someone had left behind a message that seemed intended for investigators alone. Even stranger, laboratory technicians noticed the evidence envelope had been manufactured less than 5 years earlier. The paper looked old. The ink did not. Whoever assembled the package wanted it to appear forgotten. Someone wanted the discovery to look like a ghost reaching across decades. The sheriff authorized the reopening of archive files before sunrise. Dust-covered cabinets rolled open for the first time in years. Boxes stacked shoulder-high filled an entire records room. Photographs curled at the edges. Cassette interviews. Handwritten maps. Telephone logs. Hundreds of pages documenting thousands of investigative hours. All centered around one missing woman whose name had slowly disappeared from conversations, but never from the nightmares of those who had searched for her. The retired detective stared at her photograph for a long time. She smiled at the camera with the effortless confidence of someone who believed tomorrow was guaranteed. Tomorrow never came. She vanished after leaving work on an October evening. Her car was discovered parked beside an empty county road. Driver's door closed. Keys missing. Purse untouched. Coffee still warm. No signs of violence. No straggle. No footprints. No tire marks leading away. Only silence stretching across harvested fields beneath a sky already preparing for winter. Back then, investigators searched rivers, forests, abandoned barns, and miles of farmland. Divers found nothing. Dogs lost the scent within minutes. Helicopters spotted no disturbed earth. Every lead dissolved. Every theory collapsed. Eventually, the headlines faded. Life continued, at least on the surface. Because beneath the routines of ordinary days, suspicion quietly settled over the town. Neighbors watched each other differently. Friendships ended. Families stopped speaking. Children grew into adults hearing fragments of conversations interrupted whenever they entered the room. Some believed she had run away. Others insisted she had been murdered. A few whispered about something even darker. No one agreed. Everyone remembered. Now, decades later, a cassette hidden inside an abandoned farmhouse had reopened every wound at once. Within hours, television trucks rolled into town. Reporters filled sidewalks. Former witnesses received unexpected phone calls. Old rumors resurfaced online. People who had spent years avoiding attention suddenly found cameras outside their homes. Someone, somewhere, had decided the past was no longer finished. The biggest question was no longer what happened that autumn night. It was why someone wanted the truth uncovered now. Because whoever left that tape knew investigators would recognize it. They knew the case. They understood the evidence. Most chilling of all, they appeared confident that modern forensic science could succeed where decades of detective work had failed. By sunset, technicians made one more discovery. Pressed into the adhesive beneath the evidence envelope was an almost invisible trace. Not a fingerprint, not blood, not hair, a microscopic fragment of skin. Barely enough to see, potentially enough for DNA. The laboratory requested emergency authorization. No one slept that night. Not the detectives. Not the journalists. Not the families who had waited half a lifetime for answers. And certainly not the person who had hidden the tape. Because somewhere beyond the flashing patrol lights and television cameras, someone was watching the investigation begin again. Someone who had spent decades believing the truth will remain buried forever. For the first time in 32 years, that confidence was beginning to crack. The Midnight File, a fictional cold case thriller. Part 2. The laboratory lights never dimmed. Even after midnight, the forensic wing hummed with the quiet rhythm of refrigerated compressors, fluorescent bulbs, and computers processing data that could alter lives forever. On a stainless steel table, sealed beneath layers of protective packaging, rested the tiny adhesive fragment lifted from the evidence envelope. To the naked eye, it looked insignificant, barely visible, a speck smaller than a grain of sand. Yet everyone in the room understood the same unsettling possibility. Entire murder investigations had been solved with less. Dr. Elena Brooks adjusted her gloves before carefully lowering the sample beneath a high-powered microscope. Years of experience had taught her never to trust first impressions. Contamination disguised itself as evidence. Hope disguised itself as certainty. Cold cases demanded patience more than brilliance. The first extraction yielded almost nothing. The second produced a faint signal. By dawn, the machines confirmed what nobody had expected. Human DNA. Partial. Degraded. But real. The sheriff received the call before sunrise. "It's enough to build a profile," Brooks said quietly. "Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But it's enough." Silence filled the office. For 32 years, investigators had chased rumors, anonymous letters, contradictory witness statements, and fading memories. Now they possessed something that could not forget, exaggerate, or lie. A biological witness. News spread through the department before breakfast. Detectives who had never worked the original disappearance suddenly found themselves studying yellowed photographs older than they were. Maps covered conference room walls. Timelines stretched across whiteboards from one corner to another. Every documented movement of the missing woman was reconstructed minute by minute. 5:30 p.m. She left work smiling after joking with co-workers. 5:46. She purchased coffee at a convenience store. 6:02. A cashier remembered seeing her speaking briefly with someone outside. The cashier never identified the person. 6:14. Another driver believed he saw her sedan traveling east. He wasn't completely certain. 6:31. Nothing. The timeline simply stopped. Everything afterward became speculation. Detective Mason Reed stared at the board until his eyes blurred. One gap. 17 missing minutes. Enough time for an ordinary drive. Enough time for a meeting. Enough time for an abduction. Or enough time for someone to disappear willingly. Every theory still remained possible. "What are we missing?" he whispered. Nobody answered. Across town, reporters gathered outside the sheriff's office as satellite vans crowded the street. Cameras pointed toward every arriving vehicle. Microphones waited for statements that never came. The silence only intensified public curiosity. Social media revived forgotten rumors overnight. Anonymous users claimed they knew the killer. Others insisted local officials had hidden evidence decades earlier. Former classmates began sharing old photographs. Retired deputies found themselves receiving interview requests from national television programs. The town that had spent decades avoiding the past could no longer escape it. Meanwhile, an elderly woman named Margaret Lawson unlocked a cedar chest in her attic. She had not opened it in 29 years. Inside rested birthday cards, newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and a disposable camera still sealed inside a plastic bag. Her hands trembled. She remembered exactly why she had hidden it. She also remembered why she had never spoken about it. That afternoon, she walked into the sheriff's office, carrying the bag against her chest. "I think," she whispered to the receptionist, "I think I've been afraid long enough." Within minutes, detectives escorted her into an interview room. Margaret's memory was imperfect. She admitted that herself. But one detail had haunted her every single day. The night before the disappearance, she had driven past the old railroad crossing outside town. She remembered seeing the missing woman arguing with a man beside a dark pickup truck. She never reported it. At the time, it seemed like an ordinary disagreement. The next morning, everyone was searching for a missing person. By then, she convinced herself she must have remembered the date incorrectly. Years became decades. Fear became habit. Then the abandoned farmhouse appeared on television. The cassette, the reopened investigation. She could no longer remain silent. Detectives examined the disposable camera. Most expected the film to be ruined. Instead, technicians discovered 12 undeveloped photographs. The images slowly emerged inside the darkroom. Family picnic, birthday party, dog chasing children. Nothing relevant. Then photograph number 11. The room fell silent. Taken accidentally through a windshield, it captured the railroad crossing at sunset. The image was blurry, out of focus, but unmistakable. A pickup truck, dark-colored, parked beside the crossing. And standing near the passenger side, 2 figures. One appeared to be a woman wearing the same light-colored jacket described in the original missing person report. The other faced away from the camera. Impossible to identify. Yet, one feature remained surprisingly clear. A distinctive emblem fixed to the truck's rear window. Not a company logo. Not a sports team. A handcrafted metal silhouette shaped like a running fox. Detective Reed enlarged the photograph repeatedly. Pixels dissolved into grain. Still, the fox remained visible. He turned toward the retired detective. "You've seen this before." The old investigator nodded almost immediately. "I remember the truck." "You remember the owner?" Another pause. "I remember everyone thought it belonged to someone important. But nobody could ever prove it." The room grew quiet again. 32 years earlier, investigators had interviewed nearly every truck owner within 50 miles. Records were incomplete. License databases were primitive. Vehicle registrations had been archived on paper. If the truck truly existed, finding it again would be like searching for a single leaf inside an entire forest. Yet something else bothered Reed. Why would someone preserve an old cassette, leave behind fresh DNA, and somehow lead investigators toward forgotten evidence? It felt less like coincidence, more like choreography. Someone was guiding them, not solving the mystery, directing it. Late that evening, technicians completed digital enhancement of the cassette recording. The footsteps became clearer, the breathing sharper. Then another sound emerged beneath the static, not 3 metallic strikes. 4. The final one had been hidden beneath electrical interference. Clang, 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 clang. The retired detective closed his eyes. "I know that sound." Everyone waited. That's not random metal. "What is it?" "A railroad crossing signal." The conference room erupted. Maps reopened across every table. Railroad crossings surrounding the county were identified one by one. Modern crossings sounded different. Electronic, smooth, but older mechanical crossings. They produced exactly 4 heavy impacts before the warning bell activated. Engineers confirmed it. Only 3 crossings matching that design had existed during the early 1980s. One had been demolished years ago. One remained active after modernization. The third, stood less than half a mile from the abandoned farmhouse. The same farmhouse where someone had hidden the cassette. The same farmhouse connected to no known suspects. The coincidence felt impossible. Search teams assembled before sunrise. Ground-penetrating radar rolled across neglected fields. Cadaver dogs swept abandoned sheds. Every inch surrounding the property became an active crime scene. Television helicopters circled overhead. Residents watched from behind police tape. Some prayed. Others simply stared. By mid-afternoon, one of the dogs stopped beside a collapsed well hidden beneath vines and decades of overgrowth. The animal refused to move. Handlers recognized the behavior instantly. Something below had captured its attention. Firefighters removed broken timbers covering the opening. A camera descended into darkness. 20 feet, 30, 40, only muddy water, debris, rotting wood. Then, something pale resting against the stone wall. Not bone, not fabric. A weatherproof plastic container, carefully sealed, deliberately hidden. Recovery crews lifted it out in complete silence. Inside lay dozens of newspaper clippings documenting the disappearance. Old investigative maps, photocopies of witness interviews, several cassette tapes, and one handwritten note. The ink looked fresh. Only 6 words filled the page. You are finally asking better questions. No signature, no fingerprints, nothing else. Detective Reed looked across the field toward the empty farmhouse, standing beneath darkening skies. Someone had been here recently. Someone had watched investigators reopen the case. Someone wanted them to continue. But whether that unseen figure sought justice or intended to manipulate the investigation into a deadly trap, no one could yet tell. Far beyond the flashing emergency lights, hidden among the distant tree line, a solitary silhouette lowered a pair of binoculars. The figure remained perfectly still for several seconds before turning away, without leaving so much as a visible footprint in the damp grass. The hunt had begun again. This time, someone was hunting back. The Midnight File, a fictional cold case thriller. Part 2. The laboratory lights never dimmed. Even after midnight, the forensic wing hummed with the quiet rhythm of refrigerated compressors, fluorescent bulbs, and computers processing data that could alter lives forever. On a stainless steel table, sealed beneath layers of protective packaging, rested the tiny adhesive fragment lifted from the evidence envelope. To the naked eye, it looked insignificant, barely visible, a speck smaller than a grain of sand. Yet everyone in the room understood the same unsettling possibility. Entire murder investigations had been solved with less. Dr. Elena Brooks adjusted her gloves before carefully lowering the sample beneath a high-powered microscope. Years of experience had taught her never to trust first impressions. Contamination disguised itself as evidence. Hope disguised itself as certainty. Cold cases demanded patience more than brilliance. The first extraction yielded almost nothing. The second produced a faint signal. By dawn, the machines confirmed what nobody had expected. Human DNA. Partial. Degraded. But real. The sheriff received the call before sunrise. It's enough to build a profile, Brooks said quietly. Not today. Maybe not tomorrow. But it's enough. Silence filled the office. For 32 years, investigators had chased rumors, anonymous letters, contradictory witness statements, and fading memories. Now they possessed something that could not forget, exaggerate, or lie. A biological witness. News spread through the department before breakfast. Detectives who had never worked the original disappearance suddenly found themselves studying yellowed photographs older than they were. Maps covered conference room walls. Timelines stretched across whiteboards from one corner to another. Every documented movement of the missing woman was reconstructed minute by minute. 5:30 p.m. She left work smiling after joking with co-workers. 5:46. She purchased coffee at a convenience store. 6:02. A cashier remembered seeing her speaking briefly with someone outside. The cashier never identified the person. 6:14. Another driver believed he saw her sedan traveling east. He wasn't completely certain. 6:31. Nothing. The timeline simply stopped. Everything afterward became speculation. Detective Mason Reed stared at the board until his eyes blurred. One gap, 17 missing minutes. Enough time for an ordinary drive. Enough time for a meeting. Enough time for an abduction. Or enough time for someone to disappear willingly. Every theory still remained possible. "What are we missing?" he whispered. Nobody answered. Across town, reporters gathered outside the sheriff's office as satellite vans crowded the street. Cameras pointed toward every arriving vehicle. Microphones waited for statements that never came. The silence only intensified public curiosity. Social media revived forgotten rumors overnight. Anonymous users claimed they knew the killer. Others insisted local officials had hidden evidence decades earlier. Former classmates began sharing old photographs. Retired deputies found themselves receiving interview requests from national television programs. The town that had spent decades avoiding the past could no longer escape it. Meanwhile, an elderly woman named Margaret Lawson unlocked a cedar chest in her attic. She had not opened it in 29 years. Inside rested birthday cards, newspaper clippings, faded photographs, and a disposable camera still sealed inside a plastic bag. Her hands trembled. She remembered exactly why she had hidden it. She also remembered why she had never spoken about it. That afternoon, she walked into the sheriff's office, carrying the bag against her chest. "I think," she whispered to the receptionist, "I think I've been afraid long enough." Within minutes, detectives escorted her into an interview room. Margaret's memory was imperfect. She admitted that herself. But one detail had haunted her every single day. The night before the disappearance, she had driven past the old railroad crossing outside town. She remembered seeing the missing woman arguing with a man beside a dark pickup truck. She never reported it. At the time, it seemed like an ordinary disagreement. The next morning, everyone was searching for a missing person. By then, she convinced herself she must have remembered the date incorrectly. Years became decades. Fear became habit. Then the abandoned farmhouse appeared on television. The cassette, the reopened investigation. She could no longer remain silent. Detectives examined the disposable camera. Most expected the film to be ruined. Instead, technicians discovered 12 undeveloped photographs. The images slowly emerged inside the darkroom. Family picnic, birthday party, dog chasing children. Nothing relevant. Then photograph number 11. The room fell silent. Taken accidentally through a windshield, it captured the railroad crossing at sunset. The image was blurry, out of focus, but unmistakable. A pickup truck, dark-colored, parked beside the crossing. And standing near the passenger side, 2 figures. One appeared to be a woman wearing the same light-colored jacket described in the original missing person report. The other faced away from the camera. Impossible to identify. Yet, one feature remained surprisingly clear. A distinctive emblem fixed to the truck's rear window. Not a company logo. Not a sports team. A handcrafted metal silhouette shaped like a running fox. Detective Reed enlarged the photograph repeatedly. Pixels dissolved into grain. Still, the fox remained visible. He turned toward the retired detective. "You've seen this before." The old investigator nodded almost immediately. "I remember the truck." "You remember the owner?" Another pause. "I remember everyone thought it belonged to someone important. But nobody could ever prove it." The room grew quiet again. 32 years earlier, investigators had interviewed nearly every truck owner within 50 miles. Records were incomplete. License databases were primitive. Vehicle registrations had been archived on paper. If the truck truly existed, finding it again would be like searching for a single leaf inside an entire forest. Yet something else bothered Reed. Why would someone preserve an old cassette, leave behind fresh DNA, and somehow lead investigators toward forgotten evidence? It felt less like coincidence, more like choreography. Someone was guiding them, not solving the mystery, directing it. Late that evening, technicians completed digital enhancement of the cassette recording. The footsteps became clearer, the breathing sharper. Then another sound emerged beneath the static. Not 3 metallic strikes. 4. The final one had been hidden beneath electrical interference. Clang, 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 clang. The retired detective closed his eyes. I know that sound. Everyone waited. That's not random metal. What is it? A railroad crossing signal. The conference room erupted. Maps reopened across every table. Railroad crossings surrounding the county were identified one by one. Modern crossings sounded different. Electronic, smooth, but older mechanical crossings. They produced exactly 4 heavy impacts before the warning bell activated. Engineers confirmed it. Only 3 crossings matching that design had existed during the early 1980s. One had been demolished years ago. One remained active after modernization. The third stood less than half a mile from the abandoned farmhouse. The same farmhouse where someone had hidden the cassette. The same farmhouse connected to no known suspects. The coincidence felt impossible. Search teams assembled before sunrise. Ground-penetrating radar rolled across neglected fields. Cadaver dogs swept abandoned sheds. Every inch surrounding the property became an active crime scene. Television helicopters circled overhead. Residents watched from behind police tape. Some prayed. Others simply stared. By mid-afternoon, one of the dogs stopped beside a collapsed well hidden beneath vines and decades of overgrowth. The animal refused to move. Handlers recognized the behavior instantly. Something below had captured its attention. Firefighters removed broken timbers covering the opening. A camera descended into darkness. 20 feet, 30, 40. Only muddy water, debris, rotting wood. Then, something pale resting against the stone wall. Not bone, not fabric. A weatherproof plastic container. Carefully sealed, deliberately hidden. Recovery crews lifted it out in complete silence. Inside lay dozens of newspaper clippings documenting the disappearance. Old investigative maps. Photocopies of witness interviews. Several cassette tapes. And one handwritten note. The ink looked fresh. Only 6 words filled the page. You are finally asking better questions. No signature. No fingerprints. Nothing else. Detective Reed looked across the field toward the empty farmhouse, standing beneath darkening skies. Someone had been here recently. Someone had watched investigators reopen the case. Someone wanted them to continue. But whether that unseen figure sought justice or intended to manipulate the investigation into a deadly trap, no one could yet tell. Far beyond the flashing emergency lights, hidden among the distant tree line, a solitary silhouette lowered a pair of binoculars. The figure remained perfectly still for several seconds before turning away, without leaving so much as a visible footprint in the damp grass. The hunt had begun again. This time, someone was hunting back. The Midnight File, a fictional cold case thriller. Part 3. Rain arrived just before dawn. Not the violent kind that announced itself with thunder, but a slow, relentless curtain that erased footprints, softened tire tracks, and washed the countryside into shades of gray. Detective Mason Reed stood beneath the overhang outside the abandoned farmhouse, watching drops strike the hood of a patrol truck in an endless rhythm. Every investigator on the scene understood the same cruel truth. If someone had been watching them from a tree line the night before, the weather had just destroyed whatever trace they might have left behind. Inside the evidence tent, technicians carefully cataloged every item recovered from the plastic container hidden inside the old well. Nothing was touched without photographs. Nothing was opened without 2 witnesses present. 32 years had already been lost. No one intended to lose another clue through carelessness. Reed picked up the first newspaper clipping. The headline screamed across the faded page. Local woman vanishes without a trace. The second clipping focused on volunteer search parties. The third questioned whether the sheriff's department had ignored early evidence. The fourth carried handwritten circles in blue ink around 3 names. No explanation, no notes, just circles. Who marked these? Reed asked. No fingerprints, a technician replied. Gloves, probably. Another mystery. The cassette tapes recovered from the container were numbered 1 through 6 with black marker. Tape 1 was inserted into a forensic recorder while everyone crowded around the speakers. Static, a chair scraping across the floor, then a man's voice. Older, calm. If you're hearing this, then somebody finally found the box. Silence followed for several seconds. I don't have much time. The room froze. Every detective instinctively leaned closer. You spent years asking who killed her. A slow breath. Wrong question. The tape clicked. End of recording. Only 23 seconds. Nothing else. Nobody spoke. Finally, Reed broke the silence. Play the next one. Tape 2 began differently. This time there was wind, a distant train horn. The same voice returned. People disappear for many reasons. Another pause. Some are taken. Some leave. And some, he hesitated, are erased. Click. End of tape. 28 seconds. Reed rubbed his temples. Whoever made these wanted to provoke us. The retired detective nodded. Or teach us. Tape 3 contained only numbers. 7, 14, 9, 31. Repeated twice. Nothing more. Tape 4 was empty, except for mechanical humming. Tape 5 refused to play at all. The magnetic ribbon inside had been deliberately cut. Tape 6 contained a single sentence. Start with the church records. Click. Silence. No names. No explanations. Only another direction. The sheriff looked around the room. Church records? The retired detective answered almost immediately. In 1984, every community event passed through the church. Weddings, funerals, volunteer schedules, charity drives. If someone wanted to know where people were, they'd look there. Within an hour, 2 investigators were driving toward the oldest church in the county. The building looked unchanged despite the passing decades. White paint, dark wooden doors. A bell tower overlooking quiet streets where bicycles rested against front porches and children chased one another across damp sidewalks. The pastor welcomed them politely. When Reed explained why they had come, the old man's expression shifted. I remember that year. So does everyone. You still have your archives? The pastor smiled faintly. We never throw history away. Boxes emerged from a basement storage room smelling of dust and old paper. Volunteer sign-in sheets, choir schedules, community picnic rosters, Christmas donation lists. At first glance, they seemed ordinary, until Reed noticed something strange. One name appeared everywhere, not because the person volunteered often, because every signature looked different. Different handwriting, different ink, different pressure. Same name. Someone had signed for that individual again and again. Impossible. Unless he wasn't actually there, Reed whispered. The pastor frowned. What? Someone wanted records showing he was. Back at headquarters, another breakthrough arrived. Digital enhancement specialists had restored several frames from Margaret Lawson's disposable camera. The pickup truck became clearer. The running fox emblem sharper. Enough detail remained to identify something investigators had missed. A dent, small, circular, above the rear wheel. Old collision damage. Vehicle registration databases from the 1980s contained inspection photographs for commercial trucks. Thousands of records. Too many for human eyes. Artificial intelligence compared every archived image available. Hours passed. Then the computer stopped. Possible match. 89% confidence. The truck belonged to a construction company that had gone bankrupt in 1987. Most vehicles were auctioned. Ownership scattered across 3 states. The trail had nearly vanished. Nearly. One truck remained unaccounted for. No sale records. No scrapping certificate. No insurance claim. It simply disappeared from government files. Reed stared at the screen. So did the truck. That evening, another unexpected visitor walked into the sheriff's office. A retired railroad engineer. 78 years old. His hearing was poor. His memory was not. I heard you're asking about the old crossing. Reed invited him inside. The man removed a folded map from his jacket. There used to be a maintenance tunnel beneath the tracks. No one's mentioned that. Because nobody remembers. The engineer tapped the map. It was sealed in the late 80s after flooding. Big enough for someone to hide? He looked Reed directly in the eye. Big enough for a truck. Silence settled over the office. Within 2 hours, search warrants were approved. By sunset, excavation crews stood beside the abandoned rail line half a mile from the farmhouse. Heavy machinery peeled away decades of soil and tangled vegetation. Television cameras remained behind police barriers. No one knew exactly what investigators expected to find. The answer came shortly before dark. A rusted steel door, half buried, concrete cracked by tree roots. The old maintenance tunnel. Bolt cutters snapped the corroded lock. Flashlights pierced darkness untouched for decades. The air smelled of wet stone and rust. Water dripped somewhere deep inside. One officer counted his steps. 20, 40, 60. The tunnel widened into a maintenance chamber. Empty, except for tire marks fossilized in dried mud. Not fresh, ancient, preserved because sunlight had never reached them. A forensic photographer worked in complete silence. Then another detective's flashlight landed on the wall. Letters, carved into concrete with something sharp. 3 words. She never left. No date. No signature. Nothing else. Reed felt the hair rise on the back of his neck. The carving was old. Very old. Old enough that mineral deposits had formed inside each cut. Someone had written those words decades earlier. Someone who knew exactly what investigators had spent 32 years arguing about. Outside, rain began falling again. Far beyond the police lights, hidden beneath the branches of a dying oak tree, an unseen figure watched the excavation through binoculars. A gloved hand slowly closed around a small radio transmitter. A quiet voice broke through the static. They found the tunnel. Several seconds passed before another voice answered. I know. What now? The reply came without hesitation. Now, they find what we wanted them to find. The transmission ended. Miles away, inside the evidence lab, Dr. Elena Brooks received the preliminary DNA sequencing report. She expected another partial profile. Instead, she found something impossible. The biological sample from the envelope matched. Another DNA profile already sitting inside the national database. Not a convicted killer. Not a missing person. Not an unidentified victim. A living individual. Someone with a current address. Someone who had voluntarily submitted DNA years earlier for an unrelated genealogy project. Brooks stared at the screen in disbelief. For the first time in 32 years, the cold case had stopped pointing toward the past. It was pointing directly at someone who was still alive. The Midnight File, a fictional cold case thriller. Part 4. The DNA report arrived in a plain manila envelope. No dramatic fanfare. No flashing lights. No celebration. Just a stack of laboratory documents that weighed less than a few ounces, yet carried enough consequence to reopen 3 decades of unanswered questions. Dr. Elena Brooks read every line twice before calling Detective Mason Reed. You need to see this in person. 20 minutes later, Reed stepped into the laboratory. Brooks slid the report across the table. The profile isn't complete, but it's strong enough for a familial comparison. Reed scanned the highlighted section. The partial DNA recovered from the adhesive matched a close biological relative already present in a public genealogy database. Not an exact match. Not the contributor. Someone in the same family. Close enough that statisticians estimated a high probability of a parent, sibling, or child. Reed looked up. So, whoever touched that envelope is related to this person. That's what the science suggests. Can we identify them? Brooks nodded slowly. The database gives us a name. Silence settled over the room. For 32 years, investigators had searched for strangers. Now the evidence pointed toward a family that had never appeared on the original suspect list. The name belonged to a middle-aged accountant living nearly 500 miles away. No criminal history. No connection to the missing woman. No known reason to be involved. At least on paper. Within hours, investigators quietly assembled the family's public records. Birth certificates. Marriage licenses. Military records. property deeds, old census files. The deeper they looked, the stranger the pattern became. The accountant's father had lived in the county during the early 1980s for exactly 18 months. Then he vanished from local records. No forwarding address. No employment history afterward. Almost as if he had erased himself. The retired detective leaned closer to file. I've seen this name before. Everyone looked at him. It wasn't in the suspect list. Then where? He closed his eyes, searching through memories that faded with time. The volunteer lists, the church records. Boxes were open again. Hundreds of handwritten pages covered the conference table. Finally, one faded attendance sheet stopped everyone. There it was, the father's signature, or what appeared to be his signature, next to the date of a community fundraiser held just 2 days before the disappearance. But something felt wrong. The handwriting matched the forged signatures they had already discovered. Someone had written his name. Someone wanted history to believe he had been somewhere he might never have been. The realization changed everything. If the attendance sheet had been falsified, it wasn't creating suspicion. It was manufacturing an alibi. Someone had been protecting him. The question was why. Reed requested travel records, old payroll documents, archived tax filings, every surviving piece of paperwork. Meanwhile, another team returned to the maintenance tunnel beneath the abandoned railroad crossing. Ground-penetrating radar detected an irregular cavity behind the eastern wall. Construction workers carefully removed damaged concrete block by block. Dust filled the air. Minutes stretched into hours. Then one brick shifted inward. Behind it was a narrow compartment no larger than a closet. Inside rested a rusted metal toolbox. Locked, sealed, untouched for decades. The lock crumbled under bolt cutters. Everyone held their breath. Inside they found no weapon, no cash, no human remains. Only a stack of cassette tapes wrapped in wax paper, several undeveloped rolls of film, and a pocket notebook with most of its pages torn away. Only one page remained. It contained a list of dates. No names, no explanations. One date immediately stood out, October 18th, the night before the disappearance. Another date matched the day investigators officially suspended active searches. The final entry had been written in different ink. Only 3 weeks earlier, someone had reopened the notebook after 32 years. Someone was still adding to it. Back at headquarters, Brooks completed another round of laboratory testing. This time she examined microscopic pollen trapped inside the adhesive beneath the envelope. The results surprised everyone. The pollen came from a rare species of marsh wildflower that no longer grew anywhere near the abandoned farmhouse. Environmental records showed the plant had disappeared from the area decades earlier after drainage projects altered local wetlands, except for one location, a forgotten marsh nearly 15 miles away. Search teams mobilized before sunrise. The marsh looked untouched by time. Tall reeds swayed in the wind. Dark water reflected a sky heavy with clouds. Mosquitoes swarmed every movement. Cadaver dogs worked methodically through the soggy terrain. Hours passed without success. Then one dog stopped beside an old wooden dock, sinking slowly into black water. The handler raised a hand. Everyone froze. Divers entered the marsh. Visibility measured only inches. They searched by touch alone. On the second dive, a gloved hand struck metal. Large, rectangular, half buried beneath decades of mud. Winches slowly lifted the object toward the surface. A vehicle, dark blue, crushed roof, windows shattered. As water poured from the interior, investigators confirmed what every reporter had already begun broadcasting. It was a missing woman's car. 32 years after disappearing, it had finally been found. Yet the driver's seat was empty. No skeletal remains. No clothing. No personal belongings beyond a rusted keychain still hanging from the ignition. The discovery raised more questions than answers. If the vehicle had entered the marsh, where was its driver? Forensic technicians examined every inch before towing it away. Inside the trunk, they discovered something wrapped inside waterproof plastic. Not evidence from 1984. A modern disposable cell phone. Its battery was dead. Its exterior almost new. Someone had placed it there recently. The phone was rushed to the digital forensics lab. Technicians bypassed the damaged security system. One message remained stored inside. No contacts. No photographs. No call history. Only a draft that had never been sent. 5 words. He doesn't know I'm alive. No signature. No recipient. No explanation. Reed read the sentence again. Alive. The word echoed through the room. Was it a cruel prank? A deliberate attempt to mislead investigators? Or the first genuine indication that the original disappearance had never unfolded the way anyone believed? Outside the laboratory windows, reporters gathered in growing numbers as helicopters circled overhead. The town had waited more than 3 decades for answers. Instead, every discovery only deepened the mystery. Somewhere beyond the crowds and flashing cameras, a lone figure sat inside a parked sedan overlooking the sheriff's office. The engine remained off. The headlights stayed dark. The driver watched investigators move between buildings before quietly removing another cassette tape from the glove compartment. A black marker labeled it with a single word. Final. The figure smiled for the first time in years. Then the tape disappeared into a padded envelope already addressed to the sheriff. The game was entering its final stage. Only one side understood the rules. The Midnight File, a fictional cold case thriller. Part 5. The package arrived without a return address. No fingerprints. No postage stamp. Someone had slipped it through the sheriff's office mail slot sometime between 2 and 4 in the morning, avoiding every security camera by approaching from a narrow alley hidden behind a row of aging maple trees. The evidence technician placed a padded envelope beneath the examination light. No one touched it until it had been photographed from every angle. The label contained only one word. Final. Detective Mason Reed stared at it for several seconds before breaking the seal. Inside rested a cassette tape. Nothing else. No note. No explanation. The room fell silent as the tape was loaded into a forensic recorder. Static crackled through the speakers. A low mechanical hum emerged beneath the noise. Then came the same calm, aging voice that investigators had begun to recognize. If you've reached this recording. A pause. Then you've already discovered the car. Reed exchanged a glance with Dr. Elena Brooks. The vehicle had been recovered less than 24 hours earlier. The tape had clearly been prepared before the discovery became public. The voice continued. You're still searching for a body. Another pause. You won't find one there. The recording stopped. No forguel. No names. No answers. Only another impossible statement. The conference room erupted with questions. How could whoever recorded this know where we'd search? How did they know we'd recovered the vehicle? Were they watching us? Reed didn't answer. His attention remained fixed on a tiny detail, almost hidden beneath the static. A rhythmic clicking. 4 clicks. A pause. For more. He had heard it before. Not at the farmhouse. Not inside the maintenance tunnel. Inside the recovered car. The damage-turned signal relay had produced the same uneven rhythm when technicians briefly restored electrical power. Whoever recorded the message had been inside the vehicle after it entered the marsh. That single realization changed the entire investigation. The car had not simply disappeared in 1984. Someone had returned to it. Recently, digital forensic specialists finally extracted additional data from the disposable cell phone recovered inside the trunk. The deleted files were heavily corrupted. Most could not be restored. One survived. A 6-second audio clip. Wind. Water. Heavy breathing. Then a woman's voice. Soft. Barely above a whisper. If you're hearing this. A metallic impact echoed in the background. That I'm running out of time. The file ended abruptly. Laboratory analysis could not determine when it had been recorded. The phone itself was modern. The voice was impossible to identify. But the emotional weight inside those 7 words settled over the investigation like a storm cloud. The genealogy lead continued to expand. The accountant whose DNA partially matched the envelope agreed to meet investigators voluntarily. He appeared confused from the moment he entered the interview room. I've never been to this county, he insisted. My father lived here. You knew that. He mentioned it once. What did he do? He never said. The accountant explained that his father rarely spoke about the past. Boxes of photographs had disappeared after his death. Old letters had been burned before anyone else could read them. Family gatherings avoided questions about the early 1980s. It had always seemed strange. Now it seemed deliberate. Before leaving, the accountant hesitated. There is something else. Reed looked up. My father used to wake up screaming. What did he say? The accountant swallowed. Always the same sentence. He closed his eyes, repeating words he had heard as a child. She wasn't supposed to survive. No one in the room spoke for several seconds. Back at headquarters, investigators reopened every interview conducted during the original case. Thousands of pages. Most repeated the same routine questions. One forgotten transcript caught Reed's attention. A 16-year-old paperboy had claimed to see headlights moving toward the abandoned rail crossing shortly after midnight. Detectives dismissed him because he changed the color of the vehicle during a second interview. Reading the transcript decades later, Reed noticed something different. The teenager had never changed the direction, only the color. Headlights, rail crossing, after midnight, exactly where the hidden maintenance tunnel had later been discovered. The witness had probably seen something real. Investigators had simply asked the wrong questions. Search teams returned to the tunnel. This time they examined the ceiling using ground-penetrating scanners. A hollow space appeared above the northern wall. Construction crews carefully removed cracked concrete. Dust drifted through flashlight beams. Behind the wall, they uncovered a narrow ventilation shaft leading upward toward the surface. It was just wide enough for a person to climb. Fresh scratches marked the metal ladder bolted inside. Not decades old. Recent. Someone had used it. Within the last few weeks. The shaft opened behind dense brush, overlooking the abandoned railroad crossing. From there, anyone could observe investigators without being seen. The realization sent officers racing through nearby woods. Nothing. No footprints. No discarded equipment. Only silence. Their observer had vanished once again. That evening, Dr. Brooks called Reed into the laboratory. I found something inside the recovered vehicle. She placed a transparent evidence bag on the table. Inside rested a single dark fiber. Synthetic. Extremely durable. Not from clothing. Not from carpeting. Microscopic examination revealed traces of heat-resistant polymer. Brooks compared it against forensic databases. The result narrowed the possibilities dramatically. The fiber originated from industrial protective gloves manufactured for workers handling high-temperature welding equipment. Very few local businesses had ever purchased them. One of those companies no longer existed. The construction firm that had owned the pickup truck with the running fox emblem. Another connection. Another circle tightening around the same forgotten corner of history. Night settled quietly over the county. Reporters packed away their cameras. Patrol units rotated shifts. The farmhouse stood empty beneath a pale moon. Or so everyone believed. Deep inside the second floor, hidden behind loose wooden panels, investigators had overlooked a tiny battery-powered recorder activated automatically. A red light blinked once, then twice. It captured every distant siren, every passing vehicle, every conversation drifting through broken windows. Someone had installed it recently, very recently. Miles away, inside an isolated cabin surrounded by pine trees, a computer screen flickered to life. The audio streamed through headphones worn by an unseen listener. The figure leaned back without speaking. One gloved hand reached toward a weathered cardboard box resting beside the desk. Inside lay dozens of photographs, maps, newspaper clippings. Every movement of the investigation had been documented with obsessive precision. On top of the pile rested a photograph taken only 2 days earlier. Detective Mason Reed, leaving the evidence laboratory. Someone had been watching the detectives, just as closely as the detectives had been searching for the truth. The figure picked up a black marker and drew a slow line through one name on the investigation board. Not because the person had died, because they had finally served their purpose. Then another envelope was prepared. Another cassette. Another clue. The game was far from over. For the first time since reopening the case, Reed wasn't chasing a ghost anymore. The ghost was leading him exactly where it wanted him to go. The Midnight File, a fictional cold case thriller. Part 6. The recorder hidden inside the farmhouse transmitted one final burst of static before falling silent. Detective Mason Reed listened to playback 3 times. No voices. No footsteps. Only the distant rumble of a freight train. And, buried beneath the interference, the unmistakable sound of a camera shutter. Click. Exactly one photograph. Whoever had planted the recorder hadn't been interested in conversations. They wanted proof that investigators had returned. Someone had been monitoring the investigation in real time. The discovery changed the strategy overnight. From that moment forward, every search location was known only to a small inner circle. Search warrants were sealed. Patrol routes changed without notice. Officers stopped discussing the case over radio channels, switching instead to encrypted communications. If someone was watching, they would soon realize the detectives had changed the rules. Dr. Elena Brooks spent the morning examining the cassette tapes recovered from the tunnel under ultraviolet light. At first, nothing appeared unusual. Then faint impressions emerged along the plastic labels. The tapes had once carried different names before someone had scrubbed them clean with solvent. Using oblique lighting and digital enhancement, the original handwriting slowly became legible. Tape A, Tape B, Tape C, Personal Journal, Interview, Meeting. They had not been created to taunt investigators. Originally, they had been part of an organized archive. Someone had deliberately dismantled that archive decades later. Meanwhile, Reed returned to the abandoned construction company. Only the concrete foundation remained. The warehouse had burned years earlier in what insurance reports described as an accidental electrical fire. Walking through the overgrown ruins, he noticed rows of rusted anchor bolts protruding from cracked concrete. Nothing remarkable, until Officer Grant called his name. Detective. Grant pointed toward the rear wall. Half hidden beneath vines was a section of concrete that looked newer than the surrounding foundation. Different color, different texture. Someone had repaired it. Construction records showed no mention of renovation. Ground-penetrating radar revealed a rectangular void behind the wall. The excavation took nearly 3 hours. When the final slab broke away, a narrow storage chamber appeared. Inside stood metal filing cabinets, locked, untouched by the fire. Inside the cabinets were employee records, payroll sheets, maintenance logs, vehicle assignments. Most had been damaged by moisture. One folder survived almost perfectly. It contained a fleet inventory. Every truck owned by the company, each listed by identification number. One entry had been crossed out in thick black ink. Beside it, a handwritten note, removed before inspection. No signature, no explanation, but the identification number matched the truck bearing the running fox emblem. That evening, Brooks made another discovery. The synthetic fiber recovered from the submerged vehicle carried microscopic traces of blue industrial paint, not automotive paint, bridge paint, railroad bridge paint. She overlaid historical maintenance records with maps from the 1980s. Only one bridge in the county had used that exact formulation. The bridge crossing the river less than 2 miles from the maintenance tunnel. The same bridge that had been closed for repairs during the week of the disappearance. Another coincidence. Or another piece of the same puzzle. Reed stood on the bridge just before sunset. The river below moved slowly, reflecting orange light across its surface. Traffic had long since returned after decades of reconstruction, but beneath the modern steel remained fragments of the original structure. He noticed fresh scrape marks on an old maintenance hatch. The lock was missing. Someone had opened it recently. Inside the narrow maintenance platform lay a disposable flashlight. Its batteries were still warm. Reed froze. Someone had been there only minutes earlier. He rushed back onto the roadway. Empty. No vehicles. No pedestrians. Only the fading echo of tires disappearing into the distance. Back at headquarters, The investigation board had grown so large it covered an entire wall. Photographs, maps, timelines, names connected by colored string. One thread stood out more than the others. Every anonymous clue had directed detectives toward genuine evidence. The unknown sender had never lied. They had only withheld the full truth. Reed stared at the board. They don't want us to fail. Brooks folded her arms. No, they want us to arrive at a specific answer. And that's what worries me, because whoever controlled the clues also controlled the pace of the investigation. Every revelation came exactly when they wanted. Every breakthrough had been anticipated. It no longer felt like detectives were solving a mystery. It felt as though they were following a script written by someone who had known the ending for decades. Outside, rain began falling again. In a parked car across the street, an unseen figure watched the lights inside the sheriff's office flicker long into the night. A gloved hand reached into the passenger seat and opened a weathered notebook. Most pages were filled with dates. Only one blank page remained. The figure uncapped a pen. Slowly, carefully, a single sentence appeared across the paper. They are finally close enough. The notebook closed. The engine started. The headlights remained off as the vehicle rolled silently into the darkness, leaving the investigators one step behind, and one step closer than ever before to the truth. Chapter 7, The Missing Driver. The first crack in the mystery did not come from a laboratory. It came from memory. Harold Quinn had spent 28 years convincing himself he had imagined what he saw that October night, every anniversary of the disappearance. He replayed the same scene in his mind until the details blurred together. By the time Detective Mason Reed knocked on his front door, Harold no longer trusted his own recollection. "I don't know if I can help," the old mechanic admitted. Reed placed the enlarged photograph of the pickup truck on the kitchen table. "You don't have to be certain." Harold studied it for nearly a minute. Then he reached for his glasses. "I know that truck." The room fell silent. It belonged to the construction company. "You worked there?" "For 6 months." "Did you ever drive it?" Harold slowly shook his head. "No." "Who did?" The old man's eyes drifted toward the rain-speckled window. "There was only one man who insisted on using that truck." "Do you remember his name?" "I remember his face." That answer was enough. Back at headquarters, forensic artists worked with Harold for hours, translating faded memories into a modern facial composite. The image was imperfect, older than the witnesses, softened by time. But one feature stood out with startling consistency: a narrow scar running beneath the left eye. When the composite was compared against archived employee photographs from a construction company, only one worker shared the same distinctive mark. Except his personnel file ended abruptly 3 weeks before the disappearance. No resignation, no terminación, no forwarding address. It was as though he had stepped out of the company and out of history. While Reed pursued the missing employee, Dr. Elena Brooks made an unrelated discovery that immediately became the investigation's highest priority: a second DNA profile. It had been recovered from the inside of one of the cassette cases. Unlike the first sample, this profile was remarkably clean, younger, better preserved. It did not belong to the same family line. It did not belong to anyone already connected to the investigation. Someone else had handled the tapes. Someone investigators had never considered. Brooks carried the report directly into the incident room. "We're no longer looking at one unknown individual." Reed frowned. 2, at least. The board on the wall suddenly looked very different. The unknown messenger, the missing truck driver, the family linked through genealogy. 3 separate threads, or 3 pieces of the same story. That afternoon, technicians completed another enhancement of the old disposable camera negatives. Modern image reconstruction extracted details invisible to investigators decades earlier. The pickup's windshield reflected a roadside billboard. The words were unreadable. The shape was not. Using historical highway surveys, analysts identified only one billboard that size, standing in the county during the early 1980s. It overlooked a narrow service road leading toward an abandoned gravel quarry. Search teams arrived before sunset. The quarry had filled partially with rainwater over the years, leaving jagged stone walls surrounding a dark artificial lake. A rusted gate blocked the entrance. Someone had cut the chain recently. Inside, the silence felt unnatural. No wildlife, no vida son, only wind moving through broken conveyor towers. Near the edge of the quarry floor, Officer Grant noticed shallow tire impressions preserved beneath a layer of loose gravel, too fresh to belong to the original case. Someone had visited within the last week. The tracks ended beside an empty maintenance shed. Inside the building, investigators found no people, only a folding chair, an empty thermos, and a notebook. Most of its pages had been removed. The final page remained. Written in careful block letters were 7 words. "You are following the wrong shadow." Reed folded the page into an evidence bag without speaking. The anonymous guide had returned, and once again they were one step ahead. As darkness settled over the quarry, Brooks received an alert from the genealogy database. A distant relative of the second DNA profile had uploaded new information only hours earlier. Not enough for a name, enough for a region. The unknown individual's family roots traced back to a neighboring county, one that had never appeared anywhere in the original investigation. For the first time, Reed considered a possibility that had haunted him since the case reopened. What if the disappearance had never been confined to one town? What if the people protecting the truth had never all lived in the same place? He looked across the investigation board, now crowded with photographs, maps, timelines, and names linked by red string. Every answer they uncovered widened the mystery instead of shrinking it. Somewhere beyond those threads, someone still possessed a complete story. And judging by the clues left behind, that person had been waiting a very long time for someone to ask the right questions. Chapter 8. The Second Victim. Morning broke beneath a sky the color of cold steel. Detective Mason Reed had barely slept. The message found inside the quarry echoed through his thoughts. You are following the wrong shadow. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't a warning. It sounded like a correction. Someone wasn't trying to stop the investigation. Someone was trying to keep it from drifting in the wrong direction. By 8 o'clock, the task force gathered around the evidence board. Red string stretched across photographs, maps, payroll records, DNA reports, and handwritten notes collected over weeks of relentless work. Every new clue seemed to connect to the same forgotten construction company, yet no single person stood at the center of the web. There has to be something we're missing, Reed said quietly. Dr. Elena Brooks looked up from a folder of laboratory reports. Maybe we're looking for the wrong victim. The room fell silent. No one answered immediately. Brooks placed 2 photographs on the table. The first showed the missing woman whose disappearance had haunted the county for decades. The second showed a faded employee identification card recovered from the abandoned company archives. A maintenance supervisor, reported to have left the company just days before the disappearance. No forwarding address. No employment records afterward. No death certificate. No trace. He disappeared too, Brooks said, but no one ever filed a missing person report. Investigators returned to the burned remains of the construction warehouse with a new search warrant. Previous searches had focused on offices. This time they examined the machine shop. Ground-penetrating radar identified a dense anomaly beneath the cracked concrete floor. Construction crews carefully removed the slab. Dust drifted into morning air. Beneath nearly 4 feet of compacted soil lay a rusted steel storage locker. Unlike everything else recovered so far, the lock had not corroded naturally. It had been welded shut. Someone had wanted to make certain it would never be opened. After nearly an hour of cutting through the metal, investigators finally lifted the lid. Inside were fragments of work clothing, a damaged wristwatch, several payroll envelopes, and human skeletal remains. The entire site fell silent. No one spoke until the forensic team completed its initial examination. There's only one individual, Brooks confirmed. Male, estimated age between 40 and 50. No obvious trauma visible at the scene. The remains were transported to the laboratory under heavy security. Outside the perimeter, reporters immediately began broadcasting live. The headlines spread within minutes. Second body discovered in fictional cold case investigation. Late that evening, Brooks began reconstructing the skeleton. The fractures told a complicated story. Several bones had broken after death due to pressure from the collapsed floor. Others were different. One rib carried evidence of a healed fracture years before death. A molar contained distinctive dental work. Enough for comparison. Hours later, an old dental office located archived x-rays stored on microfilm. The match was undeniable. The remains belonged to the missing maintenance supervisor, the man who had vanished without explanation. The discovery transformed the investigation. There had always been one victim. Now there were two. Reed reopened every employment file connected to the company. One detail immediately stood out. The supervisor had filed multiple safety complaints during the months before his disappearance. Most involved missing equipment, unauthorized nighttime deliveries, and inventory that never appeared in official records. His final complaint had never been processed. Instead, someone had stamped the file. Closed. No signature. No explanation. Meanwhile, digital forensic analysts restored one of the undeveloped film rolls recovered from the maintenance tunnel. The first frames were unusable. Water damage had destroyed them decades earlier. Frame 12 emerged slowly. An empty warehouse. Frame 13. The same warehouse at night. Frame 14. A pickup truck backed against a loading dock. Its headlights remained off. Several indistinct figures stood nearby. One appeared to be carrying a long rectangular object wrapped beneath a canvas tarp. The image was too blurred to identify faces. Yet one person wore a bright reflective jacket. Brooks enlarged the frame. A company logo became visible. The same construction company. The warehouse where investigators had just discovered hidden human remains. As the evidence mounted, tension inside the task force changed. This was no longer simply the investigation of a disappearance. Someone had concealed a death. Someone had manipulated records. Someone had hidden evidence for decades. And someone else, still unknown, had carefully guided detectives toward every major discovery. Near midnight, Reed returned alone to the evidence room. He spread every anonymous message across a long table. The notes, the cassette transcripts, the photographs, the map fragments. He arranged them chronologically. For the first time, a pattern emerged. Every clue had arrived shortly before investigators reached a dead end, almost as though the anonymous sender understood exactly when momentum was fading. Reed reached for the oldest cassette. He rewound it again. The familiar voice whispered through the speakers. "You're asking the wrong question." Reed closed his eyes. Then he finally understood. For weeks they had been asking, who killed them? The clues kept redirecting them, because the real mystery was different. He opened his notebook and wrote a new question across the top of the page. What were they trying to uncover before they disappeared? The investigation had just changed direction. For the first time, the victims themselves were no longer the end of the story. They were the beginning. Chapter 9, The Black Ledger. The question changed everything. For 32 years, investigators had asked who was responsible for two disappearances. Now Detective Mason Reed asked something entirely different. What had the victims discovered before they vanished? The evidence board was stripped clean. Photographs came down. Red strings disappeared. Instead of organizing people by suspicion, Reed reorganized them by information. Who knew what? Who had access? Who benefited from silence? Patterns that had been invisible for decades suddenly emerged. Both victims had crossed paths with the same construction company during the final week before they disappeared. Both had visited the old rail crossing. Both had appeared in records that were later altered. Neither had been treated as if they were investigating anything. Until now, the forensic accounting team spent days reconstructing the company's financial records. Most files had been destroyed in the warehouse fire. A handful survived. Among them was a ledger bound in cracked black leather. Its pages contained ordinary payroll entries at first. Fuel purchases, equipment repairs, weekly wages. Then the handwriting changed. Names disappeared. Only initials remained. Cash withdrawals increased dramatically during the months leading up to the disappearances. Each withdrawal ended with the same notation: special delivery, no destination, no invoice, no explanation. Reed frowned. What exactly was being delivered? Nobody knew. Brooks examined the ink. Different batches, different pens, different years. Someone had continued writing inside the ledger long after the company officially ceased operations. It had become more than a bookkeeping record. It had become a diary hidden inside financial paperwork. Using infrared imaging, Brooks recovered words erased decades earlier. One sentence became visible: "Do not tell the supervisor." Another: "Move everything before inspection." And finally, she saw the truck. The room fell completely silent. No one needed to ask who she might have been. Across town, retired Deputy Carl Henson agreed to a voluntary interview. He had worked the original investigation for only 6 months before transferring out of the county. Age had softened his voice, but not his memory. "We were under enormous pressure," he admitted. "Pressure from whom?" Reed asked. Carl hesitated. "Not to solve it, to finish it." The distinction hung in the air. "We were told the evidence didn't support expanding the investigation." "Who gave that instruction?" "I honestly don't know." "You never questioned it?" Carl looked down at his folded hands. "I was 26. I thought experienced people knew better." He paused. "I've regretted that ever since." We restored something from the damaged notebook. On the monitor appeared faint pencil indentations, recovered through multispectral imaging. The torn pages had left pressure marks behind. Words slowly materialized. Not complete sentences. Just fragments. Meeting. Bridge. Midnight. Ledger. The last word stopped Reed cold. The victims had known about the black ledger, which meant the ledger wasn't evidence discovered after crime. It had been part of the story from the very beginning. Search teams returned to the abandoned bridge under cover darkness. This time they focused beneath the structure rather than above it, hidden among rusted maintenance beams. Officer Grant noticed fresh rope fibers caught on an old steel bracket. Not decades old. Recent. Someone had climbed beneath the bridge. Following the fibers, the team discovered a weatherproof metal case bolted to the underside of a maintenance platform. Inside was no money, no weapon, only photographs. Hundreds of them. Every major development in the reopened investigation had been documented. The farmhouse, the tunnel, the marsh, the quarry. Even Reed himself leaving headquarters late one evening. Whoever had assembled the archive wasn't merely following the detectives. They were documenting them. Tucked beneath the photographs lay a folded sheet of paper. In neat block letters, it read, "You're closer than they ever were." Reed read the sentence twice. Brooks looked at him. "They? The original investigators?" "No." Reed shook his head slowly. "I don't think that's who the note means." He looked back at the evidence. "I think it means the victims." If he was right, then the missing woman and the maintenance supervisor had been conducting an investigation of their own before they disappeared. They hadn't stumbled into danger. They had walked directly toward it. Near midnight, as rain tapped softly against the windows of headquarters, the task force reviewed everything they had learned. 2 victims, a falsified timeline, a hidden ledger, anonymous clues, a missing truck, a mysterious observer who remained one step ahead. For the first time, the investigation felt less like solving a crime and more like uncovering a conspiracy that had quietly outlived the people who created it. Outside, unseen in the darkness beyond the parking lot, a lone vehicle idled without headlights. Its driver watched the lights inside the sheriff's office. A gloved hand rested on a final envelope. No cassette this time, just a single photograph. The image showed the missing woman standing beside the maintenance supervisor. Both were smiling. Both were alive. Written across the back in careful handwriting were 6 words. They were never meant to meet. The engine started. The envelope disappeared into the night. And somewhere, someone realized the truth was no longer buried. It was beginning to surface. Chapter 10, The Confession That Changed Nothing. The call came at 2:17 a.m. Detective Mason Reed had just closed his office door when his phone vibrated across the desk. "It can't wait," the dispatcher said. "You need to get to Memorial Hospital." 20 minutes later, Reed stepped into a dimly lit intensive care room where an elderly man lay connected to a maze of monitors. His breathing was shallow. His face was pale. Time was running out. The attending physician spoke quietly. He insisted on speaking to the lead investigator. He refused to tell anyone else. The old man slowly opened his eyes as Reed approached. "So," he whispered, "you finally found the ledger." Reed stopped in his tracks. "You know about it?" A faint smile crossed the man's face. "I knew where it came from." "Who are you?" "My name won't help you." "It might." The man coughed violently before continuing. "I never killed anyone." Reed remained silent. "But I helped bury the truth." The room fell still. A recorder was placed on the bedside table. The old man nodded toward it. "You'll want this." The red recording light blinked on. "I worked security for a construction company in the early 80s. Were you there the night they disappeared?" "Yes." "Did you see what happened?" "I saw. Enough." His voice trembled. "I was paid to move evidence." "What evidence?" "Documents." "Only documents?" A long pause. "And one vehicle." "The pickup?" The old man's eyes widened. "So, you found the truck." "We found records of it." "You never will." "What do you mean?" "It stopped being a truck long before anyone started looking." The statement made no sense. Reed leaned forward. "Explain." "It was dismantled." "Where?" "I don't know." "Who ordered it?" "I never heard his real name." The heart monitor beeped steadily. The old man's breathing became heavier. "He always met us after midnight." "Who?" Another silence. "He wore gloves." "Did you ever see his face?" "No." "His voice?" "Only once." "What did he say?" The old man looked toward the ceiling. He said, his voice cracked, "No witnesses, no records." Reed waited, but that wasn't the worst part. What was? The old man slowly turned back toward him. The woman? Yes. That she wasn't supposed to be there. Reed felt the air leave his lungs. She saw something? The old man nodded weakly. She interrupted something. "What?" "I don't know." "You must." "I swear." His breathing became irregular. "I only move what they told me to move." The monitors began sounding faster. Medical staff stepped closer. Reed had one final question. Who was in charge? The old man struggled to speak. His lips barely moved. "You arrested." He stopped, fighting for another breath. "The wrong." Another pause. "That monster." The monitors emitted one long, continuous tone. The room erupted into controlled urgency as doctors attempted resuscitation. Reed quietly stepped back. 5 minutes later, the physician removed his gloves and shook his head. The witness was gone. Back at headquarters, investigators replayed the recording repeatedly. Most of the confession raised more questions than answers. Yet one statement stood above the rest. The pickup had been dismantled. Brooks immediately requested records from every scrapyard operating within 100 miles during the mid-1980s. Nearly all had closed. Their paperwork had been scattered across county archives. Hours later, one invoice surfaced. The customer name had been blacked out. The vehicle identification number had not. It matched the missing company truck. According to the record, the truck had been crushed only 4 days after the disappearances. No inspection photograph survived. No chain of custody documents existed. Someone had ensured it would vanish legally. As investigators compared the scrapyard invoice with the black ledger, another anomaly appeared. The payment had not come from the construction company. It had come from a charitable foundation that officially had nothing to do with construction equipment. The foundation no longer existed. It had dissolved less than a year after the case went cold. Its board members had all since died or relocated. Another trail, another layer. Another carefully constructed wall between the truth and the people searching for it. That evening, Brooks examined a fragment of grease recovered years earlier from one of the cassette cases. Modern chemical analysis identified microscopic particles unique to industrial cutting torches, the same equipment commonly used to dismantle heavy vehicles. The evidence fit perfectly. Someone had recorded the tapes while working around machinery powerful enough to erase an entire truck. Not a coincidence. A connection. Near midnight, Reed returned alone to the evidence room. He spread the latest discoveries across the table. The confession, the scrapyard invoice, the ledger, the anonymous notes. For the first time since reopening the case, the pieces no longer looked random. They resembled a carefully engineered chain of concealment. Not the work of one impulsive killer, the work of several people, each responsible for hiding one part of the truth. Someone transported evidence. Someone altered records. Someone destroyed the truck. Someone kept sending clues decades later. Reed wrote 4 words across the center of his notebook. A conspiracy needs survivors. He stared at the sentence. If several people had protected the secret in 1984, perhaps one of them had finally decided to expose it. Not out of courage, not out of guilt, but because everyone else who knew the full story was gone. Outside the sheriff's office, rain began falling once again. Across the street, beneath the glow of a single flickering street lamp, a hooded figure stood motionless for less than a minute. The figure placed a small package on the front steps of the building and disappeared into the darkness before the night patrol rounded the corner. Inside the package was no cassette, no note, only a tarnished brass key attached to a faded paper tag. Written on the tag, in neat block letters, were 4 simple words. Warehouse 12. Come alone. Chapter 11. The Family Secret. Warehouse 12 had not appeared on a county map in nearly 20 years. The shipping district where it once operated had slowly emptied as factories closed and freight lines were abandoned. Broken windows reflected the pale glow of the moon, and rust covered every chain-link fence surrounding the property. Detective Mason Reed parked 2 blocks away. The anonymous note had instructed him to come alone. He ignored the order. Although no marked units followed him, Officer Grant and 2 plainclothes investigators watched the area from concealed positions several hundred yards away. Reed wasn't about to trust someone who had manipulated an entire investigation through anonymous messages. The brass key fit the warehouse door perfectly. The lock turned with surprising ease. Someone had lubricated it recently. The cavernous interior smelled of dust and old timber. Moonlight slipped through holes in the roof, casting pale columns across rows of abandoned shelving. There were no footprints, no voices, only silence. Then Reed noticed a single lantern burning near the far wall. Beneath it sat a wooden crate. Inside the crate rested a weathered metal cash box. No trap, no explosive, no weapon, only a thick bundle of letters tied together with faded blue ribbon. Every envelope carried the same handwriting. None had ever been mailed. The first letter began simply, "If anyone is reading this, I failed." Reed carefully unfolded the brittle paper. The author described growing suspicion that company records were being altered after hours. Shipments arrived with incomplete manifests. Vehicles entered the yard but never appeared in inventory. Workers were warned not to ask questions. The letter ended with one sentence that immediately caught Reed's attention. The supervisor believes someone inside the company is documenting everything. The supervisor, the man whose remains have been found beneath the warehouse floor. A second letter mentioned meetings at the abandoned rail crossing. A third referred to photographs hidden where water keeps secrets. The handwriting matched neither the anonymous notes nor the cassette labels. This was someone new, someone who had tried to leave a record without ever sending it. Back at headquarters, Dr. Elena Brooks made another breakthrough. The second DNA profile recovered from the cassette case had finally produced a meaningful genealogical lead. Not a direct identity, a family tree. After hours of comparison, one name appeared in both family histories, not as a suspect, as a distant cousin shared by 2 completely different bloodlines. Brooks stared at the monitor. That's impossible. The missing maintenance supervisor and the unknown cassette handler were connected through a branch of the same extended family that had splintered generations earlier. It wasn't close enough to suggest conspiracy by itself, but it destroyed the assumption that everyone involved had been strangers. Some of them had known each other long before the construction company ever existed. Reed returned with the letters just after sunrise. Brooks spread family records across the conference table: birth certificates, marriage licenses, probate files, old census records. One photograph stopped them both. Taken at a county fair decades before the disappearance, it showed several families gathered around a picnic table. Children laughed toward the camera. Adults smiled without noticing the photographer. Standing near the edge of the frame were two young men. One would later become the maintenance supervisor. The other resembled the facial composite created from Harold Quinn's memory. They weren't co-workers who had met by chance. They had grown up in the same community. The investigation had taken another unexpected turn. The company had not brought strangers together. It had reunited people whose lives had crossed years earlier. Grant entered carrying another archive box. We found employment applications. Most were routine. One was not. The application belonged to the missing truck driver. The emergency contact section had been crossed out. Beneath the ink, multispectral imaging revealed a handwritten name that had been deliberately obscured decades earlier. It matched the surname appearing in Brooks' newly reconstructed family tree. Another hidden connection. Not proof of guilt. Proof that relationships inside the company were far more complicated than anyone had realized. That afternoon, the task force gathered around the evidence board. For the first time since the case reopened, Reed removed several red strings. They don't belong. Grant looked puzzled. We've been connecting people by suspicion. Reed nodded. And we've overlooked something simpler. He replaced the strings with blue ones. Connect them by trust. The board changed instantly. Small clusters appeared. Friends, relatives, neighbors, people who attended the same schools, families who had known each other for decades. The construction company wasn't merely an employer. It had become a meeting point for an already interconnected community. Someone inside that network had uncovered something dangerous. Someone else had decided that secret could never leave the county. As evening settled over headquarters, Brooks received one final laboratory report. The ink used in the anonymous notes, the labels on several cassette tapes, and the writing on the brass key tag all originated from the same uncommon fountain pen formulation. The notes had not been written over 30 years. They had been written recently by the same hand. Whoever was guiding the investigation had carefully recreated the appearance of old evidence, not to deceive the detectives, but to force them to revisit the past exactly as it had been remembered. Reed looked once more at the family tree pinned to the wall. This case was never about one missing person, he said quietly. Brooks nodded. It was about a secret that survived longer than the people who tried to hide it. Outside, unnoticed by everyone inside headquarters, a solitary figure paused beneath the glow of a streetlight. The figure looked toward the windows of the investigation room for only a moment before placing one final envelope into a public mailbox across the street. Unlike the others, this envelope bore a return address. It was blank. Inside rested a single Polaroid photograph. On the back, written in careful block letters, were 5 words. The truth is underground. The photograph showed the entrance to an abandoned storm drain on the outskirts of town, a place no investigator had searched. Not yet. Chapter 12, Beneath the Storm Drain. The storm drain had existed so long that most people no longer noticed it. Hidden beneath an overgrown embankment at the edge of the old industrial district, the concrete entrance disappeared behind tangled vines and decades of neglect. Rainwater trickled steadily into darkness, carrying leaves, gravel, and the faint echo of traffic from the highway above. Detective Mason Reed stood at the entrance just before sunrise, the anonymous Polaroid clutched inside an evidence bag. The truth is underground. It was another clue, or another trap. By now, Reed assumed it was both. Unlike previous searches, this operation remained confidential. Only a handful of investigators knew the location. Patrol units established a quiet perimeter several blocks away, while Dr. Elena Brooks accompanied the forensic team into the tunnel. "If someone's been leading us here," Grant muttered, adjusting his flashlight, "they may already be waiting." Reed nodded. "Stay alert. We document everything." The tunnel stretched farther than county engineering maps suggested. Old maintenance markings covered the walls, some faded beyond recognition, others surprisingly fresh. Every few hundred feet, narrow service chambers branched away into darkness. Most were empty. One wasn't. A rusted steel cabinet stood against the wall, secured with a heavy chain that had recently been cut. Dust covered its shelves, but one compartment had clearly been disturbed. Inside lay a stack of rolled architectural drawings. Brooks carefully unrolled the largest sheet. It wasn't a blueprint for the drainage system. It was a survey of the construction company's warehouse property from more than 30 years earlier. Several areas had been marked in red pencil. One location carried a handwritten note: "Records transferred." Another: "Inspection canceled." The final marks circle a section of the warehouse floor where investigators had already recovered the maintenance supervisor's remains. Grant looked up. "Someone mapped this long before he got here, and someone wanted us to find it," Reed replied. Back at headquarters, the blueprints were digitized and compared with historical county records. The comparison revealed a discrepancy. The warehouse shown on official permits differed from the one actually built. A storage room appeared on the blueprint, but never appeared in inspection documents. It had existed only on paper, or so everyone believed. Using the measurements, engineers reconstructed the building in 3 dimensions. Hidden between 2 documented walls was a narrow void, large enough to conceal a room. The warehouse had burned decades earlier. The room, if it had ever existed, would now lie beneath layers of collapsed concrete. Reed immediately organized another excavation. Meanwhile, Brooks continued analyzing the anonymous letters. Rather than focusing on the handwriting, she examined the paper itself. Tiny fibers embedded within the pages matched stationery manufactured during the early 1980s. But the ink was modern. Someone had written recent messages on vintage paper. The effect had been deliberate, not to fake old evidence, to preserve the illusion that the past was speaking directly to the present. "Whoever this is," Brooks said quietly, "they're obsessed with history." The excavation lasted 2 days. Heavy machinery removed fractured concrete, while archaeologists documented every layer. Late on the second afternoon, workers uncovered the outline of a reinforced doorway buried beneath the collapsed foundation. It matched the hidden space shown on the blueprint. The steel door had warped from heat, but remained largely intact. After hours of cutting, investigators finally forced it open. A stale breath of air escaped from the darkness. The room beyond was astonishingly orderly. Metal shelving lined the walls. Dust covered everything. Boxes remained stacked exactly where someone had left them decades earlier. Unlike every other location in the investigation, nothing appeared disturbed. Brooks opened the nearest box. Inside were employee personnel files. Another contained shipping manifests. A third held financial ledgers. Every document had been carefully cataloged, as if someone intended to preserve them rather than destroy them. Near the back of the room, Reed discovered a locked wooden desk. The key rested inside the top drawer. Whoever had secured the room expected someone to return. The desk contained a leather-bound journal. Its first page carried no name, only a sentence: "If this room is ever opened, the lies have finally begun to fail." Reed turned the page. The entries described growing concern inside the company: unauthorized deliveries, missing inventory, pressure from unnamed individuals to alter records, repeated references to the committee. No names, only that title. Each entry grew increasingly cautious. The final page ended mid-sentence: "They know someone has been keeping copies. If I disappear..." Nothing followed. The remainder of the journal was blank. That evening, Brooks made one final comparison. She aligned the dates in the journal with the anonymous clues received over recent weeks. A pattern emerged. Every clue had pointed investigators toward evidence in the exact order the journal described. The unknown messenger wasn't choosing locations at random. They were reconstructing someone else's unfinished investigation. Reed looked at the journal for a long time. We've been treating the anonymous sender as the author. Brooks slowly shook her head. No, they're the curator. The journal belonged to someone else. Someone had inherited decades-old evidence, protected it, organized it, and only now decided the time had come to reveal it. Outside the evidence room, rain began tapping softly against the windows once again. On Reed's desk sat the letter journal, the warehouse blueprints, and the growing family tree that connected lives across generations. For the first time since the case reopened, the mystery no longer felt like a maze. It felt like a story interrupted in the middle. Somewhere, one final witness still held the missing chapter. And somewhere else, someone was waiting to see whether Reed would be the first person in 32 years to read it to the end.